Hey guys, welcome back to Colombian Influence. My name is Risa and this is Erica. And today sort of in studio, I guess via Zoom, we have Daria Rottenberg, who also goes by Valentina. And we are going to be interviewing her here soon in just a minute. Erica, if you want to just kind of give us the, Colombian Influence vibes. Like, what are we all about?
Yeah, so Colombian Influence is all about... we have so many things. Not only influence people who are adoptees, but just everyone in the world. I think everyone can benefit from what we talk about and the interviews and just how to understand adoptees. Mainly, we're just kind of trying to mainstream this conversation about adoption using our own experiences as well as others in the community. So we are just excited to have another interview, a Zoom live interview in studio. So this is going to be fun.
Yes. So welcome, Daria/Valentina. Thank you for joining us today.
Yay! Cool to see. Awesome. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So, I guess let's just kind of start with, obviously all of our interviews are either adoptees or usually parents of adoptees. That's kind of as far as we've gotten. So Daria is a fellow adoptee like us. So let's just kind of get to know your backstory. If you wouldn't mind just kind of starting with a little bit about yourself, where you were adopted from, where you live now, how old you were when you were adopted.
Okay. So, hey guys, I'm Daria, but I also go by Valentina. I'm adopted from St. Petersburg, Russia. When I was 6 years old, I came over to the States and I grew up in a small town in Michigan. I was adopted twice, but I also had a mid family in between. So I went through 2 different families before I found my official family. And then I moved to LA about 4 years ago. So now I live in LA, and maybe about 2 years ago, roughly, I started going on this journey of just connecting to myself and my Russian self and just my story and all that. So yeah, it's been a good journey so far. It's been crazy.
Wow, 6 years old is a lot older than us. We were only a couple months. So do you remember anything being in Russia when you were younger?
Yeah. I have a lot of memories. There are a lot of bad memories, but also at 6 years old and also in the 90s in Russia, it was a really tough time. Mm-hmm. So I think, with most of us adoptees, we all have kind of a rough backstory, hence the adoption, so the memories aren't that great, but I've learned to take the good out of the memories to help me connect to my past and try to kind of put that puzzle together.
Mm-hmm. So you said that it took a few, I guess, families to, find the forever family that you ended up with. I usually hate that term, but I don't really know what else to use in this case. But was that prior to being 6 years old, or was that like starting that process at 6? I'm just curious more about the timeline.
It's so complex, and I'm always trying to find a way to kind of shorten my answer. But I was at 4 years old. I ended up in my first orphanage in Russia. And then from there, I was in 2 more orphanages. So 3 orphanages in Russia. And then in my last orphanage is when I was adopted into my first family, and we did the whole legal process in Russia. And then I came over to the States. It wasn't the healthiest environment for me within that family. So I was with them between 6 and 8. And then I think probably around 7, Child Protective Services was trying to put me into another family. So I was with my mid family, I call them now. Mm-hmm. And then I went back to the first family to kind of try that again, I guess, because they couldn't find a placement for me yet. And then that's when I met, my family, the Rottenbergs, and it was just kind of meant to be. And here I am now.
Wow. So were you in Michigan? Were those other families in Michigan, or were you kind of all around the States?
All in Michigan. I'm like, I don't even know where I was with my mid family. I don't really talk about that too much because it wasn't too long of a time that I connected with them. But yeah, it was all in Michigan within like vicinities that I've been to.
Wow.
Yeah. So I always say now, like 3 orphanages, 3 families. And that's like, I just sum it up really quick. So people can be like non-adoptees. It's easier for them to be like, whoa, okay.
Sure.
You know?
Absolutely.
Wow. So I guess with your name being Daria and then Valentina, like, did they keep your name from Russia? Do you have any backstory on that at all?
So I can confirm now, like a lot more, that in Russia, when a child is adopted, they lose their original identity. So my first identifying birth name that was, given to me by my birth parents, Valentina, that name and that identity is completely lost and dropped. And the family that adopts you gives you kind of a new identity and name. So it was changed from Valentina to Daria, actually, in Russian, but they Americanized it more and then called it Daria. And then the nickname of that is Dasha. And then the nickname of Dasha is Dashenka. And then I just found out, because I'm connecting more to my Valentina Russian, birth identity. The nickname of Valentina is Valia. So I go by a lot of different names now by different people as they get to know me. Like some of my Russian adoptee friends call me Dash, which is the shortened nickname for the nickname that I have. It's so much, but I connect to all the names and I appreciate all of them. And I think it's kind of special that people call me what they feel drawn to calling me.
Mm-hmm.
That's really kind of similar to you, Risa, because I mean, you can talk about that.
Yeah. With me, I mean, I was born Amaranta in Bogota, and then my parents, thankfully, did not keep that as my first name. Can only imagine that probably in Minnesotan schools. I'm trying to pronounce and spell Amaranta. So that is now my middle name. I was given the name Teresa as my first name. And then kind of later in high school, it was kind of just like started evolving and started going by Risa instead. And now sometimes people even shorten it to Reese, and it's like, all right, that's fine. Whatever you kind of feel is right. And, my friends from before then, like in middle school, still call me Teresa. And it's like, that makes sense. That's how you knew me as. And so I get the name thing. I don't think there's as many ways to shorten my name as for you. So yeah, considering the 2 that you have, but yeah, I totally get what that's like.
Well, I also think for me, like Daria is more Americanized of Daria. So I probably gotten even more questions if it was Daria or Valentina growing up, but I still got asked, where are you from? That name is different and unique. And with your birth name, that is kind of similar. It could have been a little bit more triggering or challenging, kind of explaining that all the time,
Right. That's kind of a conversation we had the other day where small talk for adoptees is super loaded because, like you said, people ask like, oh, where's that name from? And it's like, do you have 10 minutes? Like, this is more complicated than the normal person be like, oh, I'm named after my grandmother. That's like all people have. Whereas for us, it's like, well, there's a lot to unpack here. So
it is very loaded small talk. However you said it, that was like perfect way of putting it.
Yeah.
So I guess with your adoptive family, I would say your third family, are you pretty close to them? How did that go with that transition when you were older?
It's been different seasons. I guess to sum it up, like when I was younger and first adopted, I was able to just be a kid. I was 8 when I adopted into that family, and I was able to just kind of fit in. I was the only child and I fit in really well and everything was great. And I adjusted pretty well compared to the first family environment. And I was able to they kind of gave me the freedom and the space that I needed to just be myself. And I also, I think, was challenged with, I don't know if you guys are, well, I'm sure you guys are familiar with reactive attachment disorder. So I think most of us have a little bit of that in us at least, but I struggled with that in the first family, and in my family now just made it more easier for me to kind of fit in and not have to, they didn't challenge me very much, if that makes sense. So that was like a really healthy thing. And then as I got older and into my teenagers, it was like, okay, you know, we're all teenagers. We're all trying to figure ourselves out and like, don't know what we're doing. We're in high school. You know, and identity is a big thing for all of us, but I completely numbed myself down to my whole Russian side. And I did not, I mean, I was triggered by everything. I didn't want to talk about like my name. I didn't want to say anything. And I didn't have, you know, they're an amazing family, but they also didn't know to support that adoptee side of myself because they probably didn't know that it was something that I was struggling in because I didn't even know. We never talked about these things. And yeah, I guess as I got older, I just kind of moved out on my own. I was always independent, just wanted to get out and live my life. And then I slowly realized, especially, I always say now, like it took me moving across the country to California to realize like, wait, my family and all the unfolding and all these things, like I'm really blessed and I'm grateful and I have an amazing family. And, you know, we may have different love languages and, you know, the nurture and nature, we may not have the genetic, you know, connection, but there's things that they did right. And it's brought me closer to them as I got older and as I got deeper into my journey, because I was able to look at not just my perspective and all the pain, and look into their perspective and kind of put myself in their shoes and learn what adopting was like for them too. It's been a really cool growing experience in that. For sure. No, we both absolutely get that.
Yes.
That said, what is the I guess the setup of your adoptive family? Like, do you know specifically like why your parents adopted? Do you have siblings at all in that family?
Yeah. So my parents, they got married and my mom couldn't have children and they were going to, they're going to just live their life like that. And they were satisfied. And then my dad always tells me like they went on like a cruise or something. And then they realized like, no, we want kids. We want more. It's like a really great exploration that they found.
Right.
But they looked into the adopting, aid through an agency somewhere in Michigan. And I was just put into the system, like by the family, that my first family. And I was kind of a rare, immediate action case. And my dad was trying to give up on adopting because it's a really long process for, prospective parents to go through. And he said that he went into the agency and he was going to basically just, tell them in person, like, hey, we're okay. I think we're just going to take a different route or whatever, or take a break. And the woman, the social worker, I think, she handed him a photo of me and was like, well, she is actually, just got in the system. It's kind of a rare, immediate case. And he was like, that's it. And it just kind of went from there. And like, I don't even want to cry, but
it's okay. We cry here.
But he's told me that story. The thing is, like, you don't know until you ask. And I never knew that story until I asked them. So
No, I was like, shoot, we are so suckers for like stories and stuff.
This is like a every single time occurrence.
Yes.
Such a sensitive person. So like,
same.
We are too.
If it comes out again, I'm like, wait, yeah, it's still sensitive.
For sure. And like bringing it up, it brings those emotions right back into you. So we totally understand that. And it seems like it's meant to be. Like, wow, what a interesting and crazy situation for both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Like, it's just putting all the pieces together and learning of like everyone's perspective is like, it's not just about us and what we've experienced. It's the whole triad as a whole,
Oh, absolutely. That said, with everything that was going on, you had mentioned like in the system, and that sounds to me like it's kind of getting into the foster care side of things, and also kind of the domestic adoption, because initially it sounds as though it was, international, because obviously you came from Russia, but how does that all piece together? I guess this is kind of a more unusual situation that we haven't heard before.
Yeah, I don't even think, I haven't heard of a lot of adoptees being adopted like kind of multiple times within the States from Russia or from a foreign country like that. So it's been really confusing for me to try to understand, but really it just was kind of like a rare case where the family that did adopt me, just was not working out. And we had challenges within each other, and I guess the agency that they went through, that's the agency that they, put me back in or whatever, and just try to kind of pass me off. And I just went from there, but it is really interesting how that works. It's so confusing too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's definitely a first, at least as far as the interviews that we've had so far, as far as what's kind of gone on. And like you said, it's pretty rare to have people kind of return back into the system, especially after an international adoption.
And that's part of, I actually was just on the phone with my mom kind of talking a little bit more about that, but it's part of the trauma aside from the other things that were stemmed within that first family, because that age bracket from 6 to 8 is huge. And it's like my first family again, and it was a lot of installations that weren't healthy for me. Aside from that, it's also like now seeing like the paperwork, I was really just kind of tossed over, like, we don't want to deal with her kind of thing. And that's traumatic no matter how old we are, to kind of understanding that.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think a big part of that is also, and you had mentioned prior to us recording, is that you are looking into starting to read The Primal Wound, which is a lot to take in. So read it slow. But when it comes to like how you just described that as being, it doesn't matter what age you are, I think for those who haven't read The Primal Wound, or for people who haven't been adopted and don't really understand the trauma, like you said, it doesn't matter how old you are. I mean, we were 3 months old and there's still a lot there as far as how the trauma really, holds true, physically, mentally, emotionally, in every single way. And so there is no doubt in my mind that what you went through at age, between 6 and 8, obviously that's going to be pretty scarring, considering the fact that it's not, I mean, that'll be more like conscious memory, whereas kind of like the more infant kind of stuff, as far as, what people go through, like when they've been adopted at maybe 3 and under or something, or 2 and under, is going to be less conscious memory than something that you went through. So,
well, it's funny because I don't know if it's going to show me again, but
yes,
today, so it's really funny. But a lot of the times, actually lately, I've been thinking like, if I was an infant adoptee, how would I handle my experience? And what I just kind of think on that. And I think like how you said, it's kind of like a subconscious, you kind of don't know as much. And when I was 6, I was so young and a fragile age that I didn't know if because I have more memories than my birth father. I didn't know if he loved me or if he didn't, or if he was a good person or if he wasn't. Like, I was so young, I couldn't comprehend what was going on. I didn't know the full story. I didn't know what actually happened during that time. And I feel like if I was an infant adoptee, it would be harder for me because I have no memories to even go off of. But I also think it's like both are just as hard. Like, age bracket, it's hard regardless. It's challenging, but it's worth doing the work, and healing and going on this journey.
Right. Absolutely. So I guess I'm just super curious because you just went back to Russia. So do you want to tell us all about that? How did you feel going up to the time you left? What were your emotions? Why were you going there? Obviously to kind of just go back to your roots and kind of where you were from, but did something drive you to do this more at this time than before, or kind of what was the whole backstory on that?
So I'm able to speak on it now a little bit more, but not in full depth. But I have this show, and I have a friend that introduced me to the show that he's working on, and he's a Russian New Zealand adoptee, and I started connecting with him just as an adoptee and wanting to know more of my past and my journey and my story. And basically I got invited to be a part of this docu-series show called Reunited. And, during the pandemic, before the pandemic, we started like filming a little bit more on my journey here in the States. And then the next step was to go back to Russia. So it was the show, but it was also me being there and connecting to my roots and myself and my story and my memories. And I think the main thing for me was connecting to my memories, because it almost was like a past life for me. And it was I was such a fragile age where I didn't know like if these things really happened, or did this place look like this, or was this person that I thought it was, in the order of events. Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
You can dance to it.
You'll get calls if you're on Do Not Disturb.
No worries.
Sorry, guys.
You're fine. You're popular.
No, I'm not. The thing for me was just connecting to my memories and kind of not second guessing that within myself and validating myself. And I was able to do that. And not everything quite yet. It'll take more times to go back and kind of unravel more pieces. You can only do so much. But yeah, it was really fulfilling. And I'd like to say I gained a little bit more confidence from it, just knowing that every memory that I have is accurate. And that is like just the craziest feeling. It's also, not only is it beautiful, but it's also the other end of it is like, oh, dang, that actually did happen. Or that was how I felt. Or it was kind of, it's been hard to process since I've been back, just because it's so much contrast. But overall, it was something that I needed to do, and that's why I did it. And I lately kind of have been wanting to tell my story more. So it was a really fortunate thing that I was able to do that with the show. So,
wow.
Yeah.
And to have that documented is everything. Because when I went back, I didn't document anything. And it's almost like I blacked out during it. Like you just...
Which I can imagine.
There's so many emotions and so many things. So to have that series, that's amazing. I can't even... I'm jealous, to be honest. Like, I wish I could go back and redo that. But at that time, I was 18. So... That was what?
And that's probably the last thing you would be thinking about, too. It's just like, I need to take a picture of this and this and this. Like, if I'm in a moment where I'm just enjoying myself or something, that is the last thing that I'm going to document on like Instagram or something. It's just because I'm enjoying the moment. And then something like that, because you were there in Colombia for how long?
12 days.
12 days. And Daria, what about you? How long were you in Russia?
Oh, man. I was in Russia for 10 days. And I'm kicking myself about it. I wish it was longer. I really wish it was longer. As soon as I started getting comfortable being there,
of course,
left to go back to the States. So it was a culture shock, and it was really depressing, and it still is, to be honest. Like being back here when I connected so much to my Russian side.
Absolutely, I can imagine that's a lot to process, both just before, while you're there, and especially while you're back. And I think especially just knowing now, I mean, now we know that because I've never been back to Colombia, and that's something that we really want to do together at some point. And I think now we know it should be, at least 2 weeks so that we can go and actually experience it. Because like you said, any international travel, you get comfortable and then you leave. So, yeah.
Definitely. I regret not being there longer, but I do want to go back every summer and winter if I can. So I'd like to go back in the winter time. But as you said with filming, it was really challenging because it's in the moment, but it's also so vulnerable and it's so hard.
Oh gosh, I can't even imagine.
And then, I'm kind of in the industry myself, acting, modeling. So it's hard to turn things on and off because I do it naturally, but it was just challenging for me. It was really, really challenging, but it is a blessing to have that. I don't know how it's going to come out, but it's going to be great. It is what it is. It's my story. But all the different steps to it. And I'm a naturally like emotional, sensitive person. So everything is so deep to me. And before I went, I just was like 2 days before I started like actually feeling like, whoa, this is about to happen. Like I was terrified. I was so scared. And then when I was there, I, certain things that I can't share yet, but certain events happened that I was really, really freaked out and really nervous and anxious. And you're physically there. And I didn't know how to process while I was there, but I had to just do it. I'm there and you have to do what you have to do. But then since I've been home here in the States, it's like, okay, well now I get time to sit down and process and I want to, but the thing is, I don't know how to. I don't even know where to start. So that's been the most challenging thing for me is like, I don't know how. I want to, but I don't know how.
Right.
That's a really good point too. I think for me, I was just thinking back then it was 10 years ago, Instagram and stuff like that wasn't even really super popular at that time. So I think vlogging and things like that, it wasn't even coming across in my mind.
I was going to say it probably didn't even.
So I don't know. For me, it was more, I think I'd write about it. But I think if yours is taking pictures and like maybe thinking about, oh, how did that make me feel in that time? Just different ways to process it that way. I don't know. It's something that you're just going to eventually figure out. But it took me a while after I got back to feel fully comfortable with it. Even to this day, it's like, wow, I can't believe I did that. Or how does that make me feel now? I'm still kind of processing through it. What do I do now that I know my birth mom? All of those things. I thought it was going to close all of those chapters, but yet it kind of opens a little bit more.
Yes. It does. I knew that I think a lot of, I guess the stigma or the idea behind going back to like a birth country or just kind of reconnecting to our roots and our story, it's either for closure or it's for a new chapter. And I knew it was not going to be closure. I knew it was going to be a brand new chapter. I just knew it. And it is. So it's very confusing. It's very complex. There's things that, you can't be fully satisfied in your story. There's pain, there's trauma there still. But overall, I'm really grateful and blessed and like overjoyed with me going back and what I experienced there. And I'm excited to share it.
Yeah.
So do you know when that will come out?
I think I don't know yet. I think they're just now starting to kind of wrap things up and start working on all the stories, like filming wise and stuff, but I'm not sure yet, actually.
That's so exciting. Well, everyone listening, just know there's going to be a part 2 once that's out, so we can kind of go in full detail with her. We're just excited to keep this journey and connection with you throughout this, because I know it's a lot to process, and we're always here for you also. So definitely reach out anytime.
Yay.
Let's see. So I'm trying to figure out where we're at. So I think from what we've seen on your Instagram, there's some other groups and everything, and like I'm Adopted .org that you're in association with. What can you tell us about those groups and kind of just your role in all of that?
Yeah, I'm Adopted organization / charity. I found this maybe 2 years ago or so. And this is when I was like really starting to want to be more curious on my journey and wanting to be more consistent in doing the work. And I just remember I Googled, how do I find my Russian family? I mean, it's just the silliest thing, right? But it's like, that's all we can do. And I found this, the website, and then I found the Instagram, and then I found the founder, Alex, and I basically just, reached out. We started connecting, and it just kind of went from there that I became kind of like a team member or ambassador, really just an advocate for other adoptees. And I really like to, connect with other Russian adoptees, any adoptee that wants to connect in general. I think it's just so important to do that. And there's a sense of community when you're able to do it, because for me, it's not easy to do it constantly all the time.
Of course, we get that.
It can be overwhelming sometimes, but it is important and to find people within that community that you can connect to and share stories and kind of give each other validation and voices and similar experiences. So really just my part in I'm Adopted is just kind of working with Alex and helping share those stories and advocate for other adoptees, and especially with the experience with my Russian American, adoption side of things, and experiencing getting my citizenship in Russia again, and then getting the passport, and then going back to Russia, and like sharing my journey. That's really, I'm just trying to advocate for all adoptees, but also Russian adoptees to know what the process is like when they're ready, and if they're ready,
Mm-hmm.
So I just try to share as much as I can, and that's really my involvement.
I think with what you said also in regards to just kind of being able to advocate specifically also for Russian adoptees, we have definitely found that domestic versus international is super, super different. And then when it comes to the international sector, as far as every single different country, it's also incredibly different.
Yes, it is. And that's, it's so many layers to it. And with me, I can connect to any adoptee across the board, any layer, it's who you connect to as a person. Because I've met, some Russian adoptees where it's just like, I try so hard because we have this connection, but really we don't. And it's okay. And you connect who you connect with. But I always at least try with any adoptee. And then the next layer is the Russian adoptee. And then the next layer is who is on a journey as well, and who wants to connect, or who's reunited, or who hasn't. And there's just so many layers to it that you can continue to connect with everybody. Now I'm forgetting where I'm getting at with that, but yeah.
And you talked about citizenship and passports to go back. Was that a long journey for you?
I feel like for Russia, that would be very complicated.
Yes, it's really complicated and it's really traumatic. I'm not going to lie. Like I said, like in Russia, we get our first identity dropped. So my double adoption, it was really challenging because in Russia, I'm known as my first adoptive name, my first name, Daria, and then my first adoptive last name, which I'm not going to give away, but I've learned to kind of not really share that too much. But so I'm known as that name. And obviously here in the States, I'm Daria Rottenberg, which is my adopted family now. And in Russia, obviously, there's no paperwork that shows, adopted here and then here and then here, like name changes. No, it's not there. So when I went to like apply for my passport and I physically flew to like Washington, D.C. and do this, it was so triggering and traumatic because it took me going back and forth from the embassy within like an hour time slot before they closed. I went in and they're like, well, you don't have everything. You can't do it. And I'm like bawling my eyes out. I'm like, well, you guys, I flew all the way here. What do you mean I don't have everything? You guys should have told me. And basically they didn't know how to tell me that I didn't have anything to show my adopted name that's known in Russia to who I'm linked to now. But then I found out just to reapply under my first adoptive last name in Russia. So I have two different aliases, name in Russia and a different name here. And to get the process or to go through the process to merge it together is a whole nother level to it. And it's very confusing, and it would take a lot of time and energy and money, and that could be triggering too. And right now I'm not going to do that, but I definitely cried when I signed off on the paperwork to release passport in Russia, to renew under that name that I'm not anymore. It was hard, but I knew I had to do it to connect the dots in Russia, because that's what I'm known as in Russia.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It is.
And I appreciate talking about it with other adoptees, and especially other Russian adoptees that have gone through it already, because they get it, and I don't have to share everything. But just a few days ago, I met with another younger Russian adoptee who is interested in going on their journey and going back to their roots. And we just kind of, got to know each other more, and they were asking me questions since they knew I just went back. And I think just me helping people understand that it's a process. Like, if I can share that, like my experience, everyone is going to have a different story and process and path to get to their journey. But if I can at least share what I experienced, it could be similar to what they may need to prepare for.
Yes.
I think a lot of people think that it's just an easy process. I'll get my passport and go. It's a lot. And there's a lot of emotional things that you don't know about until they come up. So yeah, that's what I experienced in my journey all across.
And just being someone who people can reach out to, I think that's super important, because with Colombia, I had to go to Chicago to get my passport renewed, and I don't speak Spanish. So doing that, and they only spoke Spanish and they didn't understand why I didn't, oh, you're Colombian, why don't you speak Spanish? I'm trying to explain this to you, but I can't speak, it's just very difficult. And those are things people don't understand either. It's not just you fly there and it's all happy and easy. Especially when you're born there, it's a big process. So I'm glad I'm not alone in that, but yours is a little bit more complex.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a language barrier, and it's really hard and challenging. And I was freaked out about the two different names. Is Russia going to accept me back when I land? Because I have two different, I have this name and then I have this name, and I look super Russian in this photo, super American in this photo. They're going to think I'm doing something sketchy,
Right.
It's just, what is the funniest part about that is all my nerves. It was easier for me to get into Russia and go through customs than it was for me to fly out of the US. They asked me more questions.
I'm not even surprised.
It's when I checked into my flight, they were like, why are you this? Why are you that? Why don't you speak Russian? Because I was about to fly on a Russian flight. And they just somewhat interrogated me, and I'm like, well, I adopted twice. This is my legal paperwork here, my legal name here. And I know I go through these challenges, which they're so hard, but at the same time, I know it's for a greater good and purpose for other people that may experience that. And these things need to be changed. These laws need to be had easier and make it okay for people to go back to their birth country and connect. In Russia, it's hard to explain. It's kind of looked down upon in the culture. Why would adoptees want to come back? Why would they want to come back? And reconnect to trauma. You know what I mean? So it'll be really good to hopefully start paving the way of changing that idea.
Right. I think there's a lot of work that's being done by adoptees, in this, era of technology where we have the ability to, produce this kind of content and just be able to talk about it. Our podcast was started with one mic that we shared and one laptop, and it was we want to do this, just for, like you said, the greater good, and just to be able to get this information out there. And I feel like this is the way for adoptees, especially, to shine and finally get the information out, because it's, a group of people that exist everywhere that a lot of people don't even realize. And it's just as common as, just about every other person. And it's like, there's a lot of us. And I think there's a lot that hasn't been said that needs to be said and that needs to be understood. So.
And I think there's no guide either. Like, I didn't know I had to go through all of that to go back to my birth country. I thought it was going to be easy. And I'm adopted, and people who aren't adopted, they really don't understand. So I wish there was more of that. But again, we are being that now.
Yeah.
It's also like, for me, I've been kind of triggered more lately since I've been back. I think as I share my story, people probably think I'm just always open to talking about it. And that's not the case.
Yes.
And with that person that I just mentioned that we connected as Russian adoptees and they're younger, we were out at like an event, 4th of July. And I was really triggered because I know people, they're good intended, but they just may be ignorant and just don't understand and don't know. And I am challenged with that lately because I'm still trying to process everything so much that it's hard for me to like talk about it to everybody when I don't even know how to express it. But it was just funny. Like the comment was, oh, you guys are both Russian adoptees. Are you guys like, you guys have the same parents? Like it's the assumption is like wild to me. But it just shows me just how far-fetched of the information and understanding it is for others to, they just don't know any better, and
it's really just like the full concept of adoption is lost on people, which like, that's a really big concept to lose.
Yes.
And especially in that case with that specific situation, like, oh, you're both Russian adoptees, a massive country. It's like, are you related? It's like, well, okay, both of you are from this state. Are you related? It's the same kind of thing, like twisting it to the other side. Does this make any sense?
It shows that they, not them, but it just shows that others that are non-adopted really just don't know the adoption side and journey, adoption journey. Just maybe assume like, oh, well, then you guys are all just related. And it's like, whoa, it's just so far-fetched.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. But it's, the good side of that is like, it's our job if we want to, and we're doing the work and by doing this and spreading our journeys and our stories and our voices.
Yes. And I think it's really important. The more I'm doing it, the more I'm just realizing, wow, like a lot of these people connect with us that never had anybody. We didn't have anybody before we met each other.
Exactly.
That really could connect how we do. And so it's really important. And I'm just happy that you're doing that for Russian people because we can't do that. I mean, Russian adoptees, and
it's obviously very different than the experience that we had. So it's, good that people can like take their,
experience and
take their experience. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to ask you guys what made you guys want to, I guess, have this interview with a Russian adoptee?
Well, we are always trying to really just expand upon what kind of adoptees that we can talk to, because although, our title is Colombian Influence, the true meaning behind that is just that our Colombian side can, have that influence on our story. And that's really all that it is. It's not specifically just Colombian adoptees. It's not, any type of specific thing in that way, but it's more so just making sure like most of our interviews are generally around the same process to a certain extent, like as far as the questions that we ask, because we want to make sure that people are getting their stories out and making sure that people do see the different sides of what types of adoption there are. So, we've talked to plenty of, domestic adoptions, interracial, plenty of international adoptions, and they're all different. They're all so different. And even though we're from the same place, literally the same orphanage in Bogota, Colombia, it's like we still have a very, very different story. And that's really the true purpose behind this and how we kind of ended up coming up with this interview process when we talk to different adoptees, is that generally a lot of it is that from our end is about the same, but it's because there are so many specific things that we want to hear from people from different countries.
Yeah, exactly. And also, like, for me, I just love hearing other adoptees' stories, no matter what background it is or what layer or level it is. because it always helps me grow and helps me connect to myself, or just learn something new, or it's just, to me, I always take the good with anything, it's always like a learning, growing experience.
Absolutely. I think a lot of what we've done too, in just about every interview that we have something specific that we get out of it that is a different point of view. Mm-hmm. That said, kind of with what way back in the beginning when you were talking about your trip to Russia and the fact that you had mentioned a lot of people think that the trip back is either closure or a new chapter. And that was something that I was like,
I've never thought about it.
I hadn't thought about that. And I'm also curious, what you view your trip as.
I always thought it was closure.
But it wasn't? It was a new chapter?
No, it's completely new. It opened so many new, I would say, wounds, and kind of closed some of those wounds. I bandaged those up. I understood it a little bit better, but it's a lot when you do that reunion, and it's not always just, oh, that's perfect. Everything worked out perfectly. Even though I had a good story, I was able to find my birth mom. Some people aren't able to do that. It still was a new chapter, and still is. I'm still trying to figure out, what do I do with all this information? What do I do with having her in my life now?
Mm-hmm. Which I think for me, when you and I can go back eventually, I guess I hadn't thought about it in the one way or another, because I think that is really the only ways you can kind of pose that. And I think people need to kind of start thinking about is, how do you view it ahead of time? What might you get out of it after the fact? And I think, like you said, it's going to be kind of a combination of the two, but I think a lot of people do think of it as just closure. I don't think a lot of people view it as, well, this is going to be a new chapter. I think a lot of people think of it as just closure, and I think that can kind of limit what you get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
If that makes sense.
I think it also, I think what I'm feeling on now is the openness. I think with me, I was just so, oh my gosh, willing for answers and connection and all these things, and just to remember my memories and go back to those places and revisit that, and just putting everything together. I was so open to all of that I knew it was going to be a new chapter due to that openness. And I think, in my opinion, I think a closed chapter is a safety net to some extent. But then you make through it, you then decide if you want it to be a new chapter,
Very good point. And I also think with you being older, you understood a lot more. And so
absolutely.
I think that does play a role in it also. I was just going I don't know, what this even was. I guess let's open up and see what happens. But for you, it was were these memories I had real? Was this going to be validated when I go there? So I think it's, again, you went in it with a different perspective, but I love that view on it also, because it is a brand new chapter.
Which, that said, validating doesn't always, it doesn't mean closure. No. It's especially I think with adoptees, that's kind of been our experience reading The Primal Wound, is it's validating, but it doesn't make it any less painful.
Yes.
Exactly. And that's something that I've always known is you can do all the work you can. I don't even know how to say this without sounding negative or depressing, but it's the trauma is still trauma. It still happened. Still a circumstance got us to the adoptee experience. And we can choose to view that as a beautiful journey to unfold and work on and heal. And I'm all about kind of breaking that generational trauma, because that's exactly what it is, and that's where it stemmed from. Or we can kind of suffer inside, and either way it hurts. It hurts either way, because circumstance you can't change.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my little
So going back to I guess kind of your growing up, and then just kind of discovering this kind of side of yourself as far as what adoption kind of means to you. How do you think, and this can be as broad or as specific as you'd like, and share as much as you're comfortable with, but how do you think that adoption has affected your mental health?
Oh yeah, I was looking over that before we did this. I was looking over the questions really quick. I love that question. I didn't realize my mental health until the pandemic hit. And that's when I started digging deeper, and obviously all of our lives slowed down. And I think a lot of adoptees grew closer to themselves and each other through the pandemic. And to some extent, I think that's a blessing. So that was when I started kind of doing that. Like, I've always been like a, introspective, better, always bettering myself kind of person, but I didn't realize the mental health is a whole different level to it.